Well, good morning, everyone. We've got about another minute to go, and we're just waiting for people to log in here. So hold tight. We've got about a 40 slides here that we're going to share with you, and I'm going to comment on them. And then after the presentation, we will send you a copy of the entire presentation, as well as a copy of the slides. Okay, so we'll just logged on there to make sure everything's going to work. But we'll get going in about one moment. Thank you again for joining us. So Julie, we're 11 o'clock? You're good. Okay, well, everybody, thank you very much for joining us, and welcome to our presentation here today. We've got a slide presentation here that we're going to walk through, and if you have questions, send us your questions, and we will try and answer them in the next webinar. I realize that a lot of questions have come in. A lot of questions have come in on standard operating practices in your apartment building. What I'm spending all my time doing now is talking to my clients. So I'm going to, in the next couple of days, really talk to everyone about their best practices, and then we'll quickly do a webinar on that probably early next week on how landlords just deal with the logistics, of this business and things like that. Okay, so it's 11:01. Let's get started. Okay, so I think that other than the drugstores, the grocery stores, and Netflix, almost in every industry is envious of apartment owners. Everybody needs some place to live, and I think things for our industry are going to be, better than most. So one of the questions I get asked all the time is, what's going to happen to transaction activity? Our core business is consulting and brokerage. So I think that in a recession, or if we're heading into a recession, which looks like we are, then deals drop off. But look what's happened. This data came from Real Capital Analytics, and you can see that this is data for the last 8 weeks. This is the the total amount of commercial transactions. You can see that in the Americas, for 218, 219, and 220, it's been pretty consistent. Same thing for Europe. But look what happened in the Asia Pacific. From the Asia Pacific, they've been dealing with this virus situation now for a couple of months, and you can see that deals have clearly dropped off there. So I think the conclusion is fairly obvious here, that deal flow will drop off. Some deals will get canceled or postponed, and I think lenders are probably going to wait and see and have a wait and see approach. Now, look. No matter what, there's a lag time in commercial real estate. A cap rate being reported today was probably baked 6 months or 9 months ago. So keep that in mind. Okay. Now, so what's been the biggest issue? Well, the temporary government legislation on evictions, and we've really had lots of questions on these. And I think we're just going to put out a document or another webinar on this, within a few days to help everybody determine how they deal with rent payments and problems that they're having in their building right now. But I think the government haven't put out this edict about people can't be evicted. This can be what I would call the moral hazard, and tenants are going to get an extension in paying rent. I don't know if your lender is going to give you an extension in paying your mortgage, but we'll talk about that in a moment. So the first case. Now, look, my guess is right now, all of you watching here are probably in your spare bedroom at home. You're eating good food. You probably haven't started eating that rice and beans you've got stored in the basement, right? So meanwhile, we're sitting here at home, but our frontline staff are out there with people in the building, in the lobby, having problems, people coughing, and dealing with kids who are home from school and things like that. So I think this idea that we have here is that you should immediately consider paying your staff a one-time bonus. Have someone go down there with a check or with cash and just say, here, thank you for doing the work you're doing, because they really are on the front lines. Everybody's home. People are going to have challenges. They've got to keep the building extra clean and things like that. And I've talked to a number of clients about doing this, and they all like the idea. So I think that's something you consider. The next thing is that, I don't think that people paid enough attention to their rent roll and their caliber of tenants. So when a lender was lending on a property, he didn't ask you exactly who your renters were. Well, let's say things start getting tough and people aren't paying rent, and your lender has to make some sort of concession to you. I think if I were a lender, I'd want to see a rent roll audit. So what is the caliber of your residents? Who's likely not to pay? And you can prove to your lender you're in good shape, and the better shape you are, the more money and the more negotiation flexibility your lender will have, if they have any. It's still early in the game, and no one's making any predictions, but the purpose of this is to get us thinking and looking down the roadways. So here's the agenda for today. One, we got some just top of the waves advice. We want to talk about some short-term things you can do day to day. We want to think about what could happen in the medium term and what could happen in the long term. Certainly, one of the issues that's going to come up is lenders. And how are they lending and how are they thinking through this? We scheduled a seminar for next Thursday at the same time, and we'll have a group of lenders on the phone or on a webinar talking about how they are looking at new construction, how they're looking at lending on acquisition, refinancing, and if it gets to it, working with their clients if rent payments start having problems and people start having a problem paying their mortgage. Okay, so top of the waves advice. Look, governments have acted fairly quickly. The Bank of Canada's cut its interest rates, and I think investor appetite remains strong. Now, it might remain strong for the wrong reason. I'll talk about that in a moment. But nobody doubts that apartments are a safe asset class, right? So demand for purpose-built rentals, I think, is going to remain strong. Class A, maybe rental velocity will slow down a little bit. Seniors will probably stay put in their buildings. Younger people, if they lose their jobs, might move. But Class A is probably pretty good, but may feel something. Class B should be pretty solid. That's your basic, solid renter. Class C maybe see some turnover, as the people living there are living closer to the edge, and if there's a disruption in their income, then there's going to be a problem. But I don't think demand is going to drop off the cliff, and I think that's why the apartment business is going to remain, as strong as really, any of the better performing businesses, in these times we're going through. So leasing activity is going to see a disruption, and stay tuned. We're going to give you a couple of ideas a little bit later on. I think industrial logistics will remain strong. Self-storage, where there's very limited interaction with people, and people aren't paying a large part of their income to self-storage, that's probably going to remain very strong as well. So a couple of other apartment type assets would be niche assets like student housing and seniors. Those could face some challenges, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But for apartment owners and developers, I mean, this shift that they're going through now could be challenging in Q2 and Q3 if this thing remains contained. Institutional buyers are strong, but they're likely going to curtail acquisitions. I think everyone, and when I say everyone, I mean buyers, lenders, and sellers. Everyone's going to slow down and take a bit of a pause. Everything's just going to take longer. Look, with people working from home, inspections from municipalities and things like that, it's just not efficient working from home the way it is working, in your office and so on. So I think it'd be fair to say that whatever's going to happen is going to happen at a slower rate, and that's going to have an impact on what we do. So, when I'm talking to my clients, a lot of them have a powder dry. They're saying, like, who could be in trouble? Where's the opportunity? Well, I don't know if there are going to be that many opportunities, but if there are, let's talk about them, right? So someone says to me, I'm sitting in on cash, where the deal's going to be. I doubt that, if this thing is short-term and plays out pretty well, that there are going to be any. But probably I was thinking that the greatest threat to our industry is probably bad legislation at the provincial level. And that's all I'm going to say about it for now. But who could be in trouble? Well, a recent buyer who paid an extraordinarily low cap rate and is in the middle of a major repositioning. So if somebody bought a building at a ridiculously low cap rate and they were waiting for turnover, then go and pump $20,000, $30,000 in that apartment and then dramatically raise the rent, that game may slow down. If that guy's is not well capitalized, then maybe he could be in a little bit of trouble. In terms of new construction, it's an absolutely solid business to be in and will remain solid. But if you have an apartment building under construction right now, then there's going to just be some logistic issues, some logistical issues in terms of getting supplies, workers working on the building, supply chain issues, and so on. And so that may delay things a little bit. And if you're in the middle of a new apartment construction lease up or approaching one, then I think that could be challenging. And again, that's a topic for another day. It's an area that we spend a lot of time on in our business, leasing up apartments. But that could be a challenge, certainly not insurmountable. Certainly on the niche products like student housing, or not just purpose-built student housing, people have a lot of students in their building. If the universities, closed, the kids are going to go home, and maybe if the school year is canceled, and then leasing time for next May and next September is right now, and with all the kids going home, that could cause some disruption. And certainly in the senior sector, if this virus breaks out, within a seniors community and so on, that could be a bit of a danger right now. But overall, we don't really see a lot of things that are a big challenge for our industry, certainly much less, than other industries. So where are the buying opportunities going to be, right? I think undercapitalized buildings in mid-construction, possibly leverage land deals. So if someone's bought land and they've got, high interest rate money on it and they needed to move fairly quickly to make things work, and the deal was a good deal before, but the guy is tight, that may be an opportunity for people to maybe, buy land. Certainly REIT shares are probably a good buy right now. They're down around, 20% and so on. And then maybe apartment owners who get in trouble in another industry, who are fine in the apartment business, but they're investing in, I don't know, oil and gas or some other industry, and that's been hit. They may have a liquidity problem there, but their apartments may bail them out of it because they'll have liquidity there. And I think this might be a good opportunity for mortgage lenders with short-term money to help strong apartment owners who may have issues in other businesses that that they're involved in. So I've been doing a lot of reading. We've all got time. We're at home. And this was in Forbes magazine about communicating in a crisis. And it's something you might just want to Google and look up. So let's just go through what they talked about. And I'll try and base our presentation based on what they've said. Number one is stay on point. I'm not going to tell you general stuff here. We're apartment guys. We're going to try and tell you apartment stuff. Know how to deliver bad news. There's a little bit of bad news here for us. Things might get a little bit challenging, but it's not bad. Communicate frequently. I think this is really critical. When people aren't sure of what's happening, it's better to be talking to them than not talking to them. We've arranged a protocol. We've got about 20 staff. Everybody's working from home, but we're talking to them really clearly every day about what they should be doing, what they're doing, and collaborating as best we can. But I'm having, I think, better conversations today on a phone than I normally have by a factor of 5 or 10. The normal discussions with apartment owners and developers that were 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes are now 20, 30, 40 minutes. And people are having real good discussions with each other about how we can help each other, and just by communicating best practices and things like that. So I think be compassionate sort of goes without saying. Some people are really going to feel, stressed by this and maybe blowing this up as to more than this is. And then the last is just, give trustworthy advice. So for current owners, I think you have to prepare your leasing agents for slower traffic. And we've got some strategies coming up here. And so you're going to need your leasing agents, but they're going to have to work differently because they can't show apartments the way that they've shown them before. So your turnover could go up or down depending on your resident profile. And you're going to have to work with some tenants about paying their rent. But I think that will be a minority if we handle this property. And it is a moral hazard, right? I mean, tenants who can't afford to pay their rent should pay their rent. And you got to be careful about, how you deal with that. And we'll talk about that in a moment. And I think as I talk to more landlords and property managers and get more practices, we'll do another webinar on this topic, right? So how do you approach leasing? Well, the simple way to do it is to lease apartments like you're leasing to someone who's out of town. Look, we've all been doing this for a long time. People are very mobile. We're leasing apartments to people who never see the apartment. Well, you already know what those practices are. Use those practices to lease apartments. So better telephone discussions, more information shared with them online, and then you can do a tour on your phone, a virtual tour, and we've been doing those a lot recently, except now we're going to just do it all the time, right? So the luxury renter, they tend not to move in the short term. So a luxury renter who's playing, top rent, discretionary renter, typically moves with 2-3 months notice. They're living fairly organized lives and things like that. So I think you should be, you should be thinking about the luxury renter market is probably going to slow down a little bit. But if you're already full with a luxury building, you're probably as stable as anyone, maybe even more stable than anybody else. Unemployment, layoff notices and things like that are probably going to start happen, and that's going to be a problem, right? For larger apartment owners and who have larger buildings, I think you should create a position in the company right now for someone who I would call a lease renewal coordinator, or someone to meet with tenants who are having problems meeting their rental obligation. But it'd be pretty hard to download that onto your super. You already given a bonus to, remember, to have to negotiate that as well. And you probably have staff right now that are available to do that. And think about talking to your residents about the temporary position that they're in and about lease renewals and things like that, right? So let me give you an example. Like I've worked in, I think it said on the first slide, in 17 recessions. That's because there were global recessions I had to be a part of, but I also moved around to Alberta, to Texas, to Yellowknife, to Newfoundland, to wherever there was blood on the street, that's where we were doing leasing. And so we've had lots of experience of leasing in more difficult environments. Here's a scenario that happened to us in Ottawa. I think in the year around 2000 or something, the federal government was looking at laying off a lot of employees. Well, there was general panic among those people because everybody thought they were going to get laid off, and only a few thousand got laid off at the end of the day. So if someone came to us and said, look, I need to rent an apartment, I don't want to sign a 12-month lease, we made this deal with them. If you sign a 12-month lease and you do get laid off, we'll let you out of your lease with 60 days notice. So they came to us, and most didn't lose their job. So they came, they signed their lease, we offered them this flexibility, we had a separate addendum for them to sign, right? And I think we got more leases than people down the street who said, no, you have to sign a 1-year lease when people feel uncertain. When people feel uncertain, they don't want to make a decision. Let's help them defer making that 1-year commitment and saying, look, I'll take you in. If you lose your job, I'll let you out of your lease, as opposed to letting the apartment sit empty. Again, we're nowhere near that stage now, but let's just get ready that if we do head into a worse economy, that's going to be the case. We also found on lease renewals in Ontario, our residents have the choice of going to month to month. The landlord in this particular case, and he was actually a German owner, just very just wanted to buckle things down and said, look, I'm prepared to offer my sitting residents an incentive of a lower rent increase if they will sign a 12-month lease. But if they lose their job, we're going to let you out of that 12-month lease. So you sort of got that security, but still they were worried about if they got a pink slip that they would have to leave. Okay, so I think we might have to think a little bit creatively about this, but there are some solutions here. Coming back to the idea of virtual tours, I mean, you can do recording. You've all seen this information, right? Lots of 3D tours and things like that. That's going to become more popular. Now, this is I think a good point to make. What happens to rents and apartment values? Do they move in tandem? They don't. There will be peaks and troughs in rent, but the amplitude of the peak and trough will not be the same in value. So this graph that we tried to show here, so let's say your rents go, kind of up and down like this for whatever reason. Your value is not going to go up and down like that. I mean, rents and value they are connected, but the peaks and the valleys are going to get smoothed out. At the end of the day, you have a temporary change in your rental structure. Your physical building is still the same, right? So I think that the luxury demand may drop off a little. There'll be less stress in B quality buildings, and C might feel it a little bit more, but nothing major. Staying on point, I think this is really a time, if you are a real estate investor, to be talking to your partners, talking to your investors, and talking to your lenders, letting them know that you've got a handle on the situation. Nobody knows what's going to happen, but you've got strategies, and you're starting to think about what if lots of tenants are coming to us and saying that they can't pay their rent, right? Well, first off, have someone to deal with that who's at maybe a higher level than your superintendent, and their decision-making ability to negotiate partial payments and things like that are important. Early in my career, I worked with the landlord. It's a different situation, but I wound up having to meet tenants face-to-face to negotiate their rent. And, this is not a combative process. This is one where you just sat with the resident, tried to understand what their needs were. And I had some leeway in terms of how much we could discount the rent or forgive something and things like that. So it's going to take kind of a mid-level person to do that with good instructions for you. But most important in life all the time is relationships are important, and to keep talking to people. So, some people have asked me, will repricing occur? Maybe a few buyers will try it, but I suspect not. I think many will ask, but I think that they will be rejected. The marketplace is extremely strong. We had a purchase and sale agreement signed on Thursday. I think Thursday was the day the stock market really dropped. And, we had been negotiating LOI for a couple of weeks before, but the buyer, a solid institutional buyer, came back and said, look, we need more time for due diligence. Fine. It was 15 days. Now I think it's 60 days. So that was just logical, right? Things are going to slow down. But they did ask for, there was no financing clause in the LOI. Now, because I think they thought it was just easy to finance, they put a financing clause in the LOI, and the seller thought those were two reasonable things to ask for given the times and so on. So Will there be repricing? Maybe people will try, but I think anecdotal data suggests that that's not going to happen. And if it does happen, it's going to be, you know, a very small amount. It's just a little bit of a sop that you're throwing to it, right? You know, so we're looking for a trusted voice as to what to do here in the apartment business and what to do in our companies. And so we make a point of talking to our clients, talking to our staff just a lot more. And here's what we're doing. Our staff is all at home. We've got some work to do, but it's dropping off. So what we're going to do during this time period is make our company stronger. And by that, I mean, we are going to document all our practices. We've got lots of small practices that we just kind of, you know, people have been here for a long time, just do over and over again. But we're going to use this opportunity to write down better practices, cross-train people, and make sure all our systems wind up being stronger, right? At the end of this, because we've got good people in place and we've got time now on our hands, that would be a good practice. Write your standard operating practices. So, you know, I think people always ask about, you know, value. I think your $10 million building is probably still worth $10 million, right? I think that if you said, is there an opportunity? Well, Royal Bank stock is down, I don't know, 20% or something like that. And so if you could sell your apartment building for $10 million and buy $10 million of Royal Bank stock, and then that shoots up back to its original, you know, $90 level, I think we're down to 70 or something like that, that could be a win. But overall, whatever asset you have, it's got about the same value, but I suspect that maybe its liquidity has gone down a little bit. And that's not your worry because you weren't planning on selling. Your concern is, you know, how do you get through, you know, the next, April 1st and then, you know, subsequent months after that. So in terms of, you know, transactions and values, real estate is at best a 6-month lag time. So if a deal closed 2 weeks ago and you found out what the price per unit, what the cap rate were for that deal, that's what the market was 6 to 9 months ago, right? So I think what going forward, when you say what are values going to be, I think a very good answer is there's going to be very little data, right? So transactions are going to slow down. So that means in 3-6 months down the road, people are going to say, well, what are cap rates? Well, you're going to say, well, there really haven't been any transactions reported. So there's going to be an absence of data. But I think on the other side, what's going to be very, very positive is that money is going to be cheap, and it's extraordinarily cheap. So, you know, I think some landlords think that maybe, depending on where you sit, but if you're an apartment owner, you would say, well, interest rates have gone down, therefore my cap rate should go down because cap rates follow interest rates. Well, they do to some extent, but it's not a lockstep conversion, right? And so, you know, cap rates are an indication of the future, and the future is not clear. So therefore, I don't think that the cap rate is necessarily going to follow the interest rate down, you know, in any direct measure. So some investors are going to be sitting on cash, desperately and immediately wanting to buy real estate. Some will be paralyzed, and I think the REITs will probably pull back. The private investors could see this as an opportunity, and at least should be looking. I don't think that there's going to be a lot of bargains out there for fully stabilized apartments, but there could be something in, you know, buildings under construction, land, or deals that aren't fully baked, and opportunities there to, you know, to get something interesting. I think that, you know, interest rates are extraordinarily low. You know, 5-year money is 1.5%, 2-year money is maybe 10-year money is maybe 2%. It's moving all the time, but it's low. So financing, if you're about to refinance your building or you're about to take out financing on a newly constructed building, I think it's going to be extraordinary for you. It's going to be a little slower, but it's going to be extraordinary. It's hard to know what the capital markets are going to do. We'll talk a little bit more about that next Thursday. But I think that there will be a larger delta between cap rates and mortgage rates, and maybe cap rates stay the same and, you know, interest rates go down. So that delta might be large, but certainly it's a wonderful thing if you're in a position to refinance today on any apartment asset. So we were thinking about how could someone doing a deal right now benefit? Well, you could take advantage of the extraordinarily low interest rate today, and next week we'll talk to our lenders and ask them, should you hedge today's interest rate and lock in that low interest rate and pay a little bit of money to have that money available to you at the rates that we have today? That's, I think, an interesting strategy for people who are doing deals. So cap rates, as a lot of people ask us, you know, what do you think is going to happen to cap rates? I think cap rates are like the stock market. They predict the future. And so the future is no longer clear, so that may affect cap rates. But The revenue stream is pretty good. It's not fully clear, and if there is a problem with it, it's going to be temporary. So, there is an offsetting point in terms of the lower interest rates being positive to cap rates, but then the uncertainty of income. So our cap rate's going to go up, down, or stay the same. Well, maybe they're going to more stay the same in the middle. We'll see. We'll see as this thing develops. But the information coming to the market is going to be slow because there aren't going to be transactions there, and cap rates are based on previous transactions, which already have a lag time, and now there's probably going to be a slowdown of transactions. So what do we do here? I think it's business as usual. People are looking for strong leadership and guidance, and I think that if you're an apartment owner or an executive in a company and things like that, I think that more talking to your staff now is probably really important. I suspect that there's a disconnect generally in this business between the frontline people, I'm talking about your superintendents and your cleaners, and the people at head office. And probably the bigger your company are, the more that disconnect is. So this would be a good time to, I think, let the frontline people know that what they're doing is always been valued, but extraordinarily valued now. And anything you can do for them, even having a meal delivered to them, for the hard work that they're doing, and those gestures, I think, can go a long way. What's the wrong thing to do? Well, I think number one is to start thinking about a blanket rent reduction or a blanket policy for paying rent and things like that. I think this is that's what you need a person to be dealing with your tenants. And if you're a smaller owner, then do it yourself. But I think a blanket rent reduction would be a mistake. Not auditing your leasing process. Look, we have been through just an extraordinarily strong time. So if you had a gap or a weakness in your leasing process, the market solved the problem for you. If the marketplace slows down, if you don't have great leasing, great marketing, great sales, great turnover, spotless apartments, a great leasing platform to lease virtually, then I think it's going to start showing up now, right? So I think that you should audit your leasing process or have your leasing process audited. Not today, not next week, but I think you need to be looking at that to make sure it's robust, because if you didn't have a great leasing and marketing process, the market was forgiving you. If the market changes, it's not going to forgive you the same way. And I want to give you an analogy. And I think the other mistake or the wrong thing to do would be to not stay on top of this and to fall behind. Okay, so let's say two families are driving, and they're driving from Toronto to New York City. That's a 12-hour drive, right? The two families start up together, and they have scheduled breaks. But one family, all of a sudden, one of the kids has to go to the bathroom, and they stop, and they pull off the highway for 15 minutes, and the other family keeps driving. Now, the other family, after going to the restroom, comes back on the highway. It's going to take them hours to make up that 15 minutes. And that's the point I'm making to you. If you fall behind on your leasing, right, then that next month you're going to have more turnover and normal turnover. So you can't just catch it all up. If you fall behind in your vacancies, it's going to take months and months and months to catch up. So that's kind of what I'm saying to you, is to stay on top of it now and monitor this. And this is not the time to be setting market maker rents. Okay, so if you've got 5 apartments that have been fully renovated, you just spent $20,000 to renovate them, and you're looking for a big pop in the rent, maybe this is not the time to be holding out for top dollar, and just get those units full. Because and I've seen this over and over again, 30 years of doing this. It takes a long time to catch up once you fall behind, and the idea is to never really fall behind. So what should lenders do? Well, I think it's just talk to your clients and look for and for you, the owner, to look for the predictability of your income stream based on your resident profile. I think the stronger you show you have control of your building, the better your resident profile. I think that would be interesting. I'm saying that because a couple of lenders have contacted us, asking us about particular buildings, saying, do you think they have a strong resident profile, or do you think that they're going to have a lot of people who are going to defer paying their rent, and things like that. So we got through this with no audience here for in about 30 minutes. I want to thank Julia Yamin, who came to the office today to help me, Sally Turner, who put this together. And I think that everything is probably good. We're in a good industry, and thank you for joining us. We're going to do a few more webinars in the next week. one on best practices as best as we can determine them, specific advice. And I'm saying that because most of the questions that came in were talking about how do I deal with this scenario of, I can't evict someone if they don't pay their rent. And I think we'll get you some better answers than we've given you now. And then the lender seminar next Thursday. So thank you very much for joining us. And I think all's good.